Hi, I'm Meinu Vaid, and today I've got a book review of three books together. I've actually been reading a lot, that's why I've not been shooting because I wanted to come up with something new for you all. So, the first book I'm going to talk about is White Thorn Woods by Meinu Vaid. Now, the cover is very vintagey, it's only because I picked it up at a sale somewhere. So it was second hand and it was worth the read, and you won't believe what it cost me. It was really dirt cheap, but then it was so much more than its price. Writers generally talk about 4 or 5 main characters in their books, and even then I see some struggle therein to create their distinct personalities. But I was blown by the way Meinu Vaid has created so many characters. It's basically all about a small town where there is a wishing well, and there's a shrine attached to it dedicated to Saint Anne. That is basically Mother Mary's mother. So people go there to get their wishes fulfilled, to seek blessings for something or the other, and all the characters therein, their stories are mentioned in the whole book, and the whole plot revolves around just one thing, that there is a road proposed to go through, somewhere near the shrine, due to which the well would have to be removed. The shrine might no longer exist. So that is how the plan is. And initially, there are a lot of speculations in the town about whether this road is coming or not, and people are betting on it. People are trying to buy property in advance, and towards the end, of course, the proposal comes through. And ironically, it is solved. The problem is solved by a person who is not considered very intelligent by the townsfolk. So, because half of them want that shrine to be there, the other half are in favor of development, they want the shrine to go, or they just don't care about it. Now, in between this whole thing, there is a host of characters and their own individual stories here that are somehow connected with that wishing well and the town. So, that is the common thread running through all those stories, but my goodness, creating so many characters with distinct personalities, their own traits, and coming up with so many stories makes this book so enriching that I was blown. I took it up as a light fiction. I had zero expectations when I started, but it just blew my mind. This one thing about this author is absolutely amazing. The second thing I would like to mention is the feel good factor. I don't know, every time I pick up this book, I read a story, I'm not just intrigued. It makes me feel very good and warm and fuzzy inside. So these are feel good stories that she writes. And in future, I'm going to read more books by this author for sure. So this was the first book I wanted to review. The second one is by Daniel Menaker. Daniel Menaker has basically been an editor of New Yorker. It's a very famous magazine, and besides being an editor, he's also been a writer and also a publisher towards the fag end. So the book is My Mistake. So this book is basically his autobiography, and again, the way it's written is very distinct, in the sense that he sort of gives the whole account of his life, starting from when he was 3 months old till he turned 71. Now, the way this book is written is, of course, very interesting. There was a lot of nostalgia when he talked about childhood without television. Although when I was a child, there was television around, but then the kind of programs that they aired, it was better to look for entertainment elsewhere. So we could not rely on television much for entertainment. So that was one major problem in our times. So that is why we used to get bored and we used to hang out with people rather than with, just devices or with virtual friends. So I'm not judging, just saying. So the very way it has been presented. I find the book cover itself very interesting, wherein something has been written with a pencil and it's being, partially erased. The process is going on. So that shows particularly the job of an editor, what he does basically. But then, like I said, this is a journey of how he became an editor eventually. He started as a fact checker. I've always been intrigued with the whole process of publishing, that how these beautiful books come into our hands with this proper, illustrations in them and the cover page and the blurbs. Of course, I knew that a lot of people are involved therein and it goes through a lot of processes, editing, so many drafts, and then we get the final copy in our hands. But then I never knew that there existed these fact checkers who did such a tedious task while editing the books. That is basically the first step, in editing before they start editing any draft. And what a fact checker does is basically they go through the whole script, they zero in on the facts that are mentioned in the book, and then they cross check whether that fact mentioned as a fact is true, whether it's a fact or is there some error. So if there is an error, then they have to highlight it. It's their job, take it to the author. And sometimes if the author insists, then they let the author take the blame for it if any in future occurs. So this is the first part. Of course, then there are drafts, and there it is redrafted and fine-tuned and then collated, and that's how we get the final draft of a book. So this was one aspect of the publishing world that he talks about. Another interesting thing he mentions is that how come some average books somehow at times turn out to be bestsellers, and some very good books are quite underrated and they're not able to reach the real readers. So PR plays a lot of role. Sometimes, there are books around controversies that sell a lot. So there are so many other factors. It's not just about good language or a good plot or a good story that the editor might like. They also look at it from the marketing point of view. So that is also taken into account. And sometimes there are other factors also that sway the publicity of a book, if I may say so. And that is why sometimes very famous books are found to be overrated and some good books are found to be underrated. Then it was fun reading about his personal life also. But then let me just, spell it out very clearly over here, that once he becomes the editor, he was working for so many hours during the day that after that I did not read much about his personal life at all. It was just purely and strictly professional. Before that, however, he gives a glimpse of especially his childhood and youth, wherein he was influenced by his brother a lot. There was a constant sibling rivalry, which somehow leads to the death of his older brother also, just at the age of 29, which impacts him a lot. And this is like some kind of guilt that he carries throughout his life, and I can see why when I read the whole story. And he wrote about it as well in the magazine, which was published. On the whole, the book was very intriguing to read. I didn't want to let go, and I always was curious to know what happens next. So this is one very important thing when you're reading something and it turns out to be so interesting that it keeps you hooked. So besides getting a lot of knowledge from this book about publishing world, I also happen to enjoy this book a lot. So I highly recommend it. So I've already written the book reviews on these two books on my blog. So I'll leave the links here in the description in case you are interested. And I've been too lazy to write the review for the third one, though I have read it. So let me pick up the third book now. So this is Keeping Faith by Jodie. Again, let me just say I had zero expectations. I feel lately I have been, undervaluing fiction a lot, thinking that they are just a mumbo jumbo of lies. For a long time, I've been reading just self-help or non-fiction. So it was a pleasant change. The book by Maeve Binchy and even this one, Keeping Faith by Jodie Picoult, was very interesting. And even though it was fiction, and I kept checking whether it really is fiction, it was written in such a way that it felt truer than fiction at times. So here is a woman and her struggle to keep her daughter Faith with herself. It's basically a custody battle. Initially, a couple gets divorced, and eventually, there is this custody battle that goes on. And in the process, the child happens to start mentioning an imaginary friend that she happens to speak with. The child's name is Faith, and the problem here was that she had not been brought up into any particular religion as such. They were not the family who went to church on a regular basis or followed any rituals or practices of a particular religion. So, how come the child had so much knowledge about esoteric and religious things was beyond them? They just treated her as a figment of the child's imagination, took her to a psychiatrist also, but then she further takes it, and the psychiatrist further takes it to a conference because she is not able to get to the bottom of this, and she wonders whether she's really seeing some kind of god. And the girl insists that a god is a she, so it's a female god, which again upsets a lot many people. There are all sorts of people who try to intervene. There are people all the time, posted outside their house. There are reporters who want their juicy bit of gossip to publish here and there. They want to air their interviews on TV. Meanwhile, this custody battle is going on, and the man uses this thing against the woman that she is, projecting as if her daughter is an angel who has healing powers, who has shown stigmata also, which is basically the wounds, as they say. The people who are touched by Christ, they happen to have these wounds which resemble the wounds that Christ himself had when he was nailed to the cross, primarily between the center of his palms and the feet. So she happens to have those also. The doctors are not able to detect where the blood is oozing out from. And then comes the most interesting part. The actual legal battle that is fought in the courtroom, and where the odds are stacked against the woman, and how she ultimately gets through the whole thing. This is what this plot is all about. So there are a lot many people involved, lot many factors involved, and it makes the book a very interesting read. It's very difficult to put it down in between, and you want to know, what happens next, what happens after this. And especially the latter half of the book is extremely interesting because it just suddenly picks up that kind of pace. So again, a beautiful read, and I would highly recommend this book also. Soon I'll be writing the review of this book as well, before I forget the main things about it. So I hope you enjoyed these reviews. With this hope, I would like to sign off now. Take care and catch you soon.